Hello everyone and welcome to my channel. Today we're gonna take a look at SE0255, Implicit Returns from Single Expression Functions, a new proposal that improves the syntax especially around SwiftUI. This video is the fourth on the series What's Behind SwiftUI, where I take a look at the Swift proposals that have improved the language and that have a direct impact on the SwiftUI implementation and the syntax. If you are interested in other Swift proposal videos, I recommend you to take a look at my other series following Swift Evolution, where I take a look at different proposals that have impacted Swift over the years. As the proposal says, Swift already provides a nice syntax for one-line closures that implicitly returns the value when the closure has only one line. This allows this closure to compile, but also these higher order functions that we're used to use, like map and filter, we're used to just write them without a return, and this works and this compiles an existing versions of Swift. But if you want to use it for functions, and there are some functions that are super short and that could actually get rid of this return, this doesn't really compile currently on Swift. The compiler will complain, first of all, that the return of these functions is not used, and then that this function is expecting a return type, but the function body is not returning anything. But this proposal solves this. It allows us to remove the return keyword on functions with a single line expression like this one. And now this compiles perfectly. It's even so short and succinct that maybe we can get used to start writing it in one line. So now we can write something like this, and we have one function that just returns one, and we don't have to write the return. It's literally the same syntax as you are using if it's a closure, which makes the syntax of the language more consistent, because now if it's used to write closures without returns, they know that they can also use it with functions. But this not only works for functions, but anything that is function-like. If we have a type, a struct for example, and we define a computed variable, we can now just write here what we want to return on this computed variable, and without adding the return keyword, now it works. Even more, imagine that we have these two properties and that we want to make a computed property where the getter returns a location object that basically wraps longitude and latitude, and the setter decomposes this location object into these two properties that we have. Up until now, we had to use return here, but now we don't even have to do that, which is really nice because it makes things more symmetric and more consistent in terms of the syntax. You can even use it for subscript operators, so you can just return implicitly if it's always in one line. And this is important. This proposal only changes this syntax when the body of the functions or these function-like structures are in a single line. As soon as you add another line here to, for example, add some logging, then this doesn't compile anymore. As you can see, we're missing the return in a function, and this is because there are now two lines, and this is not what the proposal is trying to fix. There are other languages that by default the last line on a body of a function is automatically returned, but that's not what Swift wants to do, because Swift wants to be more explicit. But in these cases where it's quite obvious what's going on, the community has decided to make Swift support these use cases. And to be honest, when this proposal was first introduced, I was not super convinced about it. I was a little afraid of this change. I prefer to have things explicitly stated, but after some usage, I agree that it's really nice, and I'm quite happy that it has been approved. There is another structure that can omit the returns, and is the init. The funny thing is that an init that returns with a single line, this is the only one that makes kind of sense, because otherwise you need to assign variables and you're not returning anything. If you want to return something, the only thing you can return is basically nil for failable initializer. But it's nice to know that this is supported even if there is not much use cases for it. It's important to understand that there is a couple of sections to this rule, and it's when the function returns void, like in this following code, and when the function uses uninhabited expressions like the never return of a fatal error, then in this case it's obviously not assuming that the fatal error is returning never, because that wouldn't make sense. And this is everything this proposal does. It's a small change but makes the syntax more consistent, which is really nice. But before leaving, I want to show you what is the impact of this to SwiftUI. If we go back to this page that we have seen many times by now, and we take a look at the code that is shown here, we see that there is no return type. So here we already immediately see how this proposal is already being used. It was shown on the keynote, and you can see how important it is to make this super nice to read. I have here an example of some SwiftUI code. And this is just to show you how we are not writing a return here. We could actually just return here because that's actually what's going on. We are creating an object here and that's what we are returning. But thanks to this change to Swift, we can just ignore that and implicitly all this object that it's created, which it's the entire view that we want to create, it's automatically returned, which is really nice. But if you start to work with SwiftUI, in some cases you want to probably do some logic here to, for example, in this case, let's just say there is a prefix here that we want to show and we want to add this here, for example. Now, if you try to compile this, you immediately see an error. This may be confusing if you don't really understand what's going on and you think that SwiftUI is doing some magic here, but it's actually just normal Swift code that is using this implicitly return. At the moment that we add a new line here, now this function has 2 lines, so the implicitly return is disabled. To fix this, you just need to add the return manually, and now this works perfectly as any other Swift code has worked until now. It's not a big deal, but it's something to be aware of, and it helps understand why we can write this or this in the first place. So all of this and this nice syntax that impacts SwiftUI, it's all thanks to this proposal change. And that's it for today. This is the new change introduced in Swift 5.1 that I hope that you now understand this change a little better and how it impacts SwiftUI. If you want to know more of how SwiftUI works and what's behind the scenes, I recommend you to check my playlist about that. And if you're interested in more Swift evolution proposals videos, I also recommend you to take a look at my other videos. If you learned something, please like the video, and if you want to see more videos like this, please subscribe. Thank you all for watching and see you next time.